Get in on the action and make your bet with Sports Interaction. Summer is heating up with baseball. Can the Jays make a run at the division?
Oh, no.
Yeah. Hey, but you can bet before the game, whichever way you think. Live and in play at all your favorite teams and hot dog contests. Woo! Woo! SportsInteraction.com/STPN or download the app to get started. It's 19 plus. And what do you have to do, Steve?
Please play responsibly.
This is Agent Provocateur with Allan Walsh and Adam Wylde. Powered by Sports Interaction. Want to bet?
So we're supposed to be on hiatus, everyone. But there is something out there that is just so compelling. I felt like after talking to Adam and Jesse that we were going to do a bonus episode appended to season 2. So here we are. Our special guest today to bring us back into the studios on summer hiatus is a gentleman who is a TV writer and producer. He's written for Law & Order, Jackie Chan Adventures, MacGyver, and Magnum P.I., among many other shows. A Writers Guild of America West board member from 2018 to 2022, and a formerly on the WGA negotiation committee. Let's welcome, I guess you know what we're going to talk about. Let's welcome David Slack to Agent Provocateur.
Thanks so much.
How are you, David?
Adam, hi. How are you? Thanks for, I didn't realize you were dusting off, or you were coming out of hiatus for this. That's very kind of you, and I appreciate it.
Well, we appreciate you making time. Yeah. We appreciate you making time to come on and speak to us about certainly something that's very significant going on in your life. You're on strike.
I'm on strike. My wife is on strike. She's in SAG-AFTRA. The dogs as yet are not on strike, but I think they're having meetings. So we'll see. It's an interesting time. It's definitely, it's not great. But it's the only thing that we can do to save the middle class of both our professions. So here we are, 170,000 strong between the 11,000 members of the Writers Guild and 160,000 of SAG-AFTRA. And it's historic. We haven't done this since 1960. It was the last time any version of the two unions were on strike at the same time. And when that happened, we got just little things like residuals in TV and our pension and health plans. So, I don't like striking, but strikes work. And it's unfortunate that the bosses chose this path, but here we are. So,
can you tell us what the key issues are that led both unions to go out on strike?
Sure. It's complicated when you get into like the, down the issues. There's, specific things, particularly, SAG has so many different professions within it. So there's concerns for dancers and singers and stunt performers and background performers. And within the screenwriting world, we have concerns for screenwriters, which is what we call people who write movies, versus mini rooms in TV, which is a whole thing. And then comedy variety writers, this is, late night talk shows and shows like that. They don't even get basic protections for streaming services. So there are a lot of individual issues, but they all fall under one very simple umbrella, which is that when you do this work that makes these companies collectively $30 billion in profits every year, you should be able to pay your bills. That's it. You should be able to pay your bills. You should be able to pay your bills, pay your rent, pay your mortgage, save a little something on the side, be able to, save for your kids' school, raise a family, all of that stuff. We're middle-class unions. There's a lot of attention paid to the very visible members, whether you're talking about, some of the famous writers, showrunners out there, or, obviously, when Meryl Streep signs a letter telling you that, your union should go on strike, that carries some weight, so there are people at the upper tiers who make, fabulous sums of money, which they deserve. But for most of us, for most of the rank and file, we're the middle class, and for, 80 years or so, you've been able to have a middle class life working in Hollywood. never necessarily getting famous, always trying, but providing quality work to the studios that employ us and getting enough in return to pay your bills and save up and participate somewhat in the success of this industry that has thrived, for decades and is still thriving, by the way. So that's really what this is about. And there are, the other big issue I would say that is on the table for both unions. It's a bigger issue for actors, I think, than it is for writers at this point. But artificial intelligence, which is, going to be an issue for, and in some ways has been an issue for all labor in this country. You go back to the UAW and the robots that replaced a lot of, workers on factory assembly lines. This is a continuation of that process. For writers, those machines right now can't really do what we do, but that wouldn't stop the studios from maybe having it do a really bad version and then paying us a lot less to fix it than we would get paid if we just did the good version for them the first time. And for actors, the problem is here now. There are contracts, when background performers, the people who walk around in the background and make the place look real, like a busy coffee shop or a busy street, their contract, they're being asked to sign contracts that will let the company scan them and then use virtual background them again and again and again in perpetuity throughout the universe. So
for no compensation.
Or for a one-time payment. And outside of SAG-AFTRA's contract, a friend of mine who does audiobooks, that's her primary. She's an actress as well and a SAG-AFTRA member, but she does audiobooks. She's had her voice stolen twice by two separate AI companies who... It's good, clean audio. They used it to train their AI, and friends called her and they were like, this is you. And, they reach out to these companies and then they reach out again with lawyers, and the companies are like, you don't own your voice. You can't copyright the sound of your own voice, which is just chilling, and it speaks to the things that we're all grappling with, which is we're dealing with corporations and people running those corporations who will do literally anything that we don't stop them from doing. They will steal everything that's not nailed down. So it's, a contract for a union is about nailing down stuff so they can't steal it. But that's, I would say the overarching issue is we just want to save our middle class. We want to save the ability, I've heard stories about writers working on shows. There was a writer who wrote for Handmaid's Tale who was then driving Lyft because working on this huge hit show, household name, everybody knows Handmaid's Tale, didn't pay enough for that writer to pay his bills through a year. I think it was a guy. I can't remember. But so, with the move to streaming over the last 20 years, things that used to pay very well now pay, less and less, worse and worse. And the studios are more effectively able to, hide the money that they're making or claim that they're not making any money at all. If they've made mistakes in their business, that's their problem. At the end of the day, this is a business that a huge amount of investment has poured into over the last 20 years, and a huge amount of revenue is coming out. So it seems like you have the money to pay your workers. If you have the money to pay David Zaslav $250 million, I think you got the money to pay your workers.
And Bob Iger.
Yeah, and Bob Iger. No, it's ridiculous. It's just, Zaslav's salary is so bloated. It's the easy target. But all of them, millions and millions of dollars. And Iger has the gall to sit there on a golf course at a retreat for billionaires that he flew to in a private jet and talk about how we're not being realistic by asking for basic protections and fair pay. Okay.
So for years, just one thing, Adam, for years, David, in all of the negotiations that were going on between professional sports franchise owners and the unions like MLBPA, NHLPA, MBPA, NFLPA, the owners would come to the table every negotiation cycle crying poverty. And we're not making any, we're losing a fortune. And they did it famously in the NHL in 2004-05 in the lead up to what turned out to be a full season lockout.
Oh.
NHL owners at the time, we lost $273 million the year before. And what they notoriously did in each of these negotiations is they refused to open their books.
Oh, yeah.
It was a non-issue. And what the NHL did in the lead up to 04 is they hired a guy named Arthur Levitt, big name guy who was the former chairman of the SEC. And he was commissioned to put together the Levitt Report, where the teams voluntarily put together summaries of their revenue and expenses. He didn't audit any team. He didn't audit any of the reports given to him. And he then issued this detailed report, summarized NHL owners collectively lost $273 million. And in his conclusions, unless the players agree to a salary cap, the NHL will completely go out of business in X number of years. Yeah. And it just seems to me the parallels between what has gone on in the sports world and what's going on right now with the actors and writers. There's just incredible parallels.
Labor is labor is labor. I was telling you, I just listened to the episode you did with Keith Olbermann recently, and like the story he's telling, it's the same story. And by the way, it's the same shit the Teamsters deal with UPS or the train workers deal with. It's, the bosses, whether they pass it around or just tell it to each other, or it's just something they all arrive at independently because this is how our brains work, they all do the same stuff, the same, well, your leaders are crazy and this would break the business. It's in 2017, in our 2017 negotiation, where we took a strike authorization vote, but didn't have to strike and got, some, good contributions that helped put our health plan back in a good place. In the presentations for that, our meetings with the AMPTP, I wasn't in that negotiation. I was in the 2020 negotiation, which was surreal. But they were in person, but it's a very regimented process. Nobody speaks out of turn. It's very staid and Robert's Rules of Order professional. They gave a presentation talking about how they the studios, who we knew at the time were making $64 million a year in profit, or $1 billion a year in profit, how they didn't have any money. And in their presentation, in the PowerPoint, they actually put in a little clip art picture of a sad guy with his pockets turned out. Like Billy Ray, who wrote Captain Phillips and a bunch of other amazing movies, laughed out loud. But they don't stop. Bob Iger's sitting there on the golf course saying, like, if you understood how dire the situation was. And the thing is, the bitch of it is, it works. It works. That kind of stuff scares our members. People are afraid. The thing, I don't think it's a secret, the advantage that management has in negotiating with, hockey players or, other people in sports or, writers or actors, is that we love what we do. Right. And we want to do it for a living very, very badly. So, to think that we would be unreasonable is kind of crazy because, when I get to do my job, I'm living a dream. This is something that I wanted from the time I was a kid, and I worked very hard to get it, and I love doing it. Absolutely just joy that this brings me. So, but I can't pay the mortgage with joy. And when the companies take, a show that I worked on or helped create or added to, and they make money, profound amounts of money, in perpetuity throughout the universe and all media now existing or hereafter devised, which is what it says in every single contract that we're required to sign. It's only right that I get a reasonable and fair share of that. And that's the situation that we've had. One of the big issues for us, for the actors, it was an issue for the directors, was streaming residuals. Right. We had a system in broadcast television where you'd pay us to create it. We get a fee. And then every time you reused it, we got a reasonable percentage of that fee again. I think it was, 2/3, 3/4 of what my script fee was. So when I wrote on Law and Order, and granted, we were like NBC's Spackle, right? Like if a show didn't work out, just put a Law and Order in there. So, I've also worked on shows that never reran. But when you're on a show that works that way for the network, that they are using in that way, and they're selling ads on it, they're making money on it, it was only fair that we got that payment. And, one Law and Order would rerun 5 times. So I would make my script fee, and then I'd make, whatever percentage of my script fee 5 more times. And I've been lucky that I've been on some shows that work that way. To move over into, streaming, look at a show like Stranger Things, which is an enormous, hit. People have, how many people have signed up for Netflix and agreed to pay a monthly fee, which, by the way, we were given Law and Order away for free, right? You could just turn on your TV and watch it. People signed up and said, yes, I will pay you every month. Just put this in my veins, please. The people who've created that show, the actors, the writers, they haven't seen that kind of benefit from success that a television show under the old broadcast model worked. And the studios would probably say, well, it's a different business model. And that's not my problem. You guys created that business model. You may have made some mistakes, but at the end of the day, even like the apps that are failing, the streamers that are failing, have millions and millions of subscribers paying a monthly fee. And now you're adding an ad tier. And we know that their accounting practices are really shady. Google Bones Profits lawsuit, or look at Ed Solomon's tweets about how all these years later, the original Men in Black movie has still lost money. Somehow it's still lost money, and Ed's not due anything of his. They cook the books, they make it up. They find clever ways that are probably legal, but clever ways to hide this stuff. And that's kind of what's going on here. But for us, nothing has changed. I sit at my computer, I dream something that, the people at the top don't know how to dream, and then go through the whole process of making it a reality, turn it into a script. Then I, help produce the episodes and all of that stuff. It's very specialized skills. So I'm doing the same job. They're still making money, but me, writers like me, actors like my wife aren't getting paid what they used to pay us. And the only thing that's really changed is the mode of delivery, airwaves versus a wire.
I want to ask you about the streaming thing, David, because, that has come up again and again. And the argument I keep hearing, and this is a studio-centric argument, which is, if the studios have to disclose how many people watch their show, because I'm assuming any sort of agreement on revenue share would have to then require disclosure of how many people actually watched a show. Like, we get the publicized numbers from Stranger Things or Game of Thrones on HBO or, whatever. It's like, over 10 million, but we never actually know the real number.
Yeah.
And I wondered if, the prophecy is that if Netflix, Disney Plus, you name the streamer, it doesn't matter, had to disclose those numbers on every single episode of every single thing, that the general public might find out that they aren't perhaps as watched as the companies are making them out to be, because that stuff isn't generally publicly available, and that might hurt the stock price. And then what they'll tell you is that the company itself, the streamer, will then produce less content because they'll have less money because they've taken such a big stock loss, and that would put people in your position out of business. How do you respond to that slippery slope style argument that I've just hacked my way through on?
I think it's hedge fund bullshit. honestly. Like it's, I don't make a stock price, and I understand that the realities are that, with the hedge fundification of Hollywood, they care more about their stock price than they do about making an excellent product. And it's to the point that they're cutting costs so much that they're eating their seed corn. They're not letting us train the next generation of showrunners. They're not letting us create. We want to sell them the next generation of IP, but I guarantee you, if the next George Lucas walked in with the next Star Wars, that person would be asked, hey, can you make this part of the Star Wars universe? They won't let us give them the things that we need to make the business sustainable. And it's all because of this focus on day-to-day fluctuations in share price. And I frankly think there's a lot more money, that's a fluctuating stock price is a short con. I don't want to con anybody at all. I want to make a great quality product that people love. And to the whole thing of releasing their numbers, I think that probably works for them both ways, right? They have things that are huge hits that everybody's watching, that would, support our argument that shouldn't you give us some of what this brings you? And then they have things that they want people to think are hits that nobody's watching. So it works for them coming and going. But from about, let's say 1947 until about, still now, they have existed in an ecosystem where Nielsen estimated pretty accurately the ratings of the shows that they put out in the public. And do you know what happened to their business over that time period? It thrived. It absolutely thrived. So if this is some, I just don't think part of it is I think the tech mindset that's come in with Netflix and Apple, and everybody's building a streaming app. So you hire people from tech for that. And I think data is closely guarded because who knows how we could crunch that and what we could find out. But, and by the way, none of the Writers Guild's proposals require them to share that data. That's not actually something that the WGA is seeking. We have, I believe, our thing is called a tiered fixed, so it just goes off their subscriber tiers.
Okay.
But I don't think that. SAG is seeking success-based residuals, is my understanding, and I just don't think that's the existential threat to these companies that they think it is. And I think that if their stock, look, Netflix, took a huge stock hit when they had a bad earnings report. I don't know how many quarters ago, year and a half, maybe. They're doing fine. They're doing just fine, better than fine. So it's a little bit, the thing that you're talking about like if they, they say they lost, $10 million one year, and it's really, no, they just didn't make $10 million. So, I don't know. I just don't give a shit about their stock price. I want to make their stock price go up by making good products that everybody wants to see. But if you're going to wring your hands about, and look, there are ways to do this stuff where it's somewhat confidential. We in 2007, 2008, last time the WGA was on strike, we actually won the right to audit the studio's books. Now that audit is subject to extreme confidentiality. We can't release any of the information that we see in the audit, but we can at least make sure that on the macro level, they're not lying to us and hiding profits. So there are ways in a union negotiation to satisfy what workers are asking for without fundamentally damaging the company's interests, which nobody wants to do. And if they say that's, would be fundamentally damaging, I don't know that I believe them, but that's a reasonable claim and that's a conversation to have. But it's not a conversation to have when they won't sit down with any of us. So that's the other part is just we're outside your gates, guys. Yeah. No, they haven't spoken to the WGA, to my knowledge, or expressed any interest to negotiate with us since we went on strike on March 1st. And they've used other unions as kind of an excuse. Oh, we're too busy talking to the DGA. We can't negotiate with you. Now we're too busy talking to SAG-AFTRA. I don't know what their excuse is this week because SAG's out there with us. I don't know how they justify saying they can only do one thing at a time. I routinely do 8 things at a time. That's my job. But they, I guess, can only talk to one union at a time. So
Now, David, I've lived through some very long lockouts in the hockey world, and one of the things that we confronted very early on is the psychological warfare that takes place behind the scenes from the league and from the owners. So one common tactic is after a long period of time of no talks at all, let's put out the word that now we're ready to talk. And here are the players, or in your case, the writers and the actors, who one of the topics, and it's just human nature. What do you hear? What's going on? Any updates? You're on strike. Players locked out, not making any money, losing paychecks. What's the latest? Anything happening? And it's very hard for people when they are on strike or locked out to grasp why there are no talks going on, right? So the other side will put out, yeah, we're interested in getting together and talking. And that leads people to think, aha, there's a breakthrough coming. Hopes get raised. Everybody gets excited. They haven't even met yet, but all of a sudden expectations get raised. And my experience is that in many ways, that's just a form of warfare put out there to bring you up and then crash you back down again.
Yeah, no, same. They do all that stuff, and they were very successful at it in 2007, 2008. That was very hard. We really, because the one difference is that the news for our industry, the trade publications, Hollywood Reporter, Variety, they're, every single ad in those publications is paid for by the studios. So
right.
Whose side editorially do you think they're going to be on in a situation like this? And in the last strike, it was just Nikki Fink and her newly launched site Deadline that was getting relatively, pretty accurate stuff out to writers. But we didn't have social media in the way that we have now, and we didn't have we have a captain system where we have writers who are captains who communicate with other members. So we've gotten very, very good at getting accurate communication to our members and getting our members to tell us what they're thinking, feeling, and hearing, so that we can communicate that up to leadership. We didn't have a lot of that stuff back then, and it was very, very hard. Now, Nikki Fink, may she rest in peace, has passed away. Deadline is now owned by Penske Media, which also owns Hollywood Reporter and Variety. Literally all three papers in our industry are owned by the same dude. But
would that be the auto racing Penske, by the way?
Maybe.
Same Penske?
Maybe.
Okay.
I don't know. Probably. Let's say yeah.
Okay.
But we have spent 20 years thereabouts working to educate our membership on union literacy. And one of the big things of union literacy is the stuff you were just talking about, which is the same tactics that they use, regardless of whether you're writing screenplays or cutting pipe on a factory line, which is your leaders are crazy. They chose this, you're going to lose. You'll be worse off with a strike than you would be with a negotiation if you had just been reasonable.
You're losing money you'll never get back.
You'll never get back. You need to take things off the table, and that's a big one. And I've by and large, the writers are like, we're all sick of walking a picket line, but everybody I talk to is like, nah, yeah, fuck it. Let's do it as long as we're in this far. We got to win it. People are determined, and we're on I think today's day 86 or something. We went 100 days last time, and it felt like landing the planes with the wings on fire. We got through it, but it was rough. I'm not hearing that. And part of it is SAG joined us, a couple of weeks ago. And that was like, it was like day 74 for me, but it felt like day one because now we got all these people and they're happy and they're not, they're all great looking and, like it's just really buoys your spirits. So, we're determined and we're holding together. And it's just at the end of the day, we have to. Because, you should be able to do this job and pay your bills. And it seems like what the studios want to create is a system that not only would be bad for us, it would be bad for them. Just as, loggers replant forests and farmers will rotate their crops and, let fields lie fallow. They had a system. We together had created a system where you could work in this business and make enough while you were working and enough off residual payments that you could afford to live within easy driving distance of the studios. And sometimes in LA, that means 20 miles, but still, ready to work at a moment's notice. And every moment that you're not working, you're trying to come up with a new product to sell them. That was good for us and it was good for them. And it created, just as like the loggers with the trees and the farmers with the fields, it created an ecosystem. The mentality now, as we've moved from studio bosses like Robert Evans, who love movies, to studio bosses like David Zaslav, who love money and tax write-offs. They're killing that ecosystem. And they kind of want this just to be gig work. And I've seen them make that argument and try to get away with things where, every once in a while, a writer who's like a script coordinator, but they want to be a writer and they get to write a script. And they get paid their script fee for writing their script. And I talked to two people this was happening to, a writer and a writer's assistant and a script coordinator. And the studio's argument was, no, while you're getting your script fee, we're not paying you to do the other job that you're still doing. Because your script fee should count as your pay. And I was like, no. That script fee under my union contract counts for the script. The other job, which by the way is also under a union contract, counts for that job. But that's the mentality, is just they want to. They'd pay us nothing if they could. Right. Absolutely, they'd pay us nothing if they could. And frequently, sometimes they get away with that. Whether it's actors doing self-tape auditions where you're buying, equipment like this, and a backdrop and a lighting kit and all that stuff, or it's, I create television shows and they don't all go to air and I create them on spec. I'm doing that for free. I don't get paid to do that. I only get paid when I sell it to them. So a lot, and in features, free work is a huge problem. You'll have writers do, 5, 6, 7, 10, 11 drafts, endless rewrites, getting paid for one step, but they don't want to step away from the project. So, they want something for nothing. And the union is here because it's very hard as an individual to say, go fuck yourself. And also, please pay me because I need to feed my family. The union's here to stand up for all of us.
Adam?
Well, in listening to that, I can feel the frustration. And I think what happens in these negotiations so much, David, is that waters get muddied. So I think people ultimately want to know, like the average guy just like me who just really likes to watch shows, what do you want? Like, let's use this platform to be clear about it. What are you guys after?
Well, we've had 2 years of 6% plus inflation. We need raises commensurate with that, and to frankly make up for the money lost during it. We need a streaming residual system that works in a way similar to how TV residuals work. That because a lot of my job, and I've had to work on myself psychologically to cope with this. A lot of my job is being unemployed. I lost my job during the strike. The show I was writing for, Magnum PI, got canceled because the contracts were up on the actors and the studio didn't want to, pay to renew them. So, I don't have, and no one in my career has, the sort of certainty of like, well, I'm going to go to this office and I'm going to go to this office every day for, 15, 20, 30 years. And then I'm going to watch and I'm going to sit in a chair. Like, it's constant hustle. And I need to be making enough when I'm working to be able to support myself to look for the next job, because that's just the way it works. Shows come and go. And it used to be seasonal in television. But anyway, so we need residuals that allow us to participate in the success of the shows that we make, and to be able to, sustain us during lean times, which is only fair considering that the companies are always making more off of what we create, a product they can't make themselves. And then we need protections from changes in technology, and some protections around the way that certain business practices are going on, whether you're talking about self-tape auditions for the actors or the abuses of free writing in features. So, like, to boil it down, we need a fair deal on compensation, both initial comp and our residual compensation. And we need some workplace protections around the ways that we work, so that it's, in some cases it is genuine physical safety for like stunt performers, but for the most part, it's a sort of, economic and quality of life safety, that we're not working, years sometimes for free on stuff. So that's, and it's, none of it will break the bank at all. The companies collectively make $30 billion in profit a year. The WGA's total ask is an increase of, I think it was 454 million over 3 years or something. Like, these are, pennies on the dollar. It would be 2% of their profits, or 0.2% of their revenues,
or two CEOs.
Yeah. No, right. If you want to do it in Zaslavs, we're asking 2 Zaslavs. SAG is asking, I think, like 6 or 7 Zaslavs, but they're a much bigger union. So, no, but it's genuinely, and by the way, also, another way to put it is Barbie's opening weekend, just the opening weekend. That movie's going to go on and make money, again, in perpetuity throughout the universe, in all media now existing or hereafter devised. Just Barbie's opening weekend would have covered the entire WGA contract.
Wow.
That we're asking for. Now, just obviously, that money goes to, P&L and, all the marketing stuff. And, Margot Robbie, I don't think, worked for free. It's not that movie didn't have costs, but in terms of their ability to get a return on their investment, a lot of movies don't work out. A lot of shows don't work out. But dollar for dollar, it's very hard to find an investment better than a successful TV show or a successful movie. And the proof's in the pudding. There are a lot of people who have become billionaires off of this stuff. And they wouldn't still be in this business if it wasn't incredibly, incredibly lucrative. We're literally making shit up and selling it to people. That's what I do. I literally just sit here and think of lies. I write them down, try to make them sound as true as I can, and that makes money. It's one of the only industries where there's no raw materials to mine. You just need the workers who know how to mine them. And what we're asking for is reasonable. So, and by the way, it's worked for them. It's worked for them for, 80, 90, 100 years. Like, but it's
so the studios,
like
David,
at the table doesn't want to, you pay a fair share of the check,
Right.
Like,
right. The studios and the streamers have gotten together and they form what's called an alliance, and they're known as the AMPTP.
Mm-hmm.
Can you talk to us a little bit about them? Because it's interesting that the streamers have been putting the studios allegedly slowly out of business and changing their entire business model. Yet here they are sitting at the table together as so-called partners.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It's really interesting. The AMPTP is not new. It's existed in one form or another for decades. I believe the current incarnation, I want to say 1974, but I might be wrong, somewhere in the 70s. And that was when the Association of Motion Picture Producers and the Association of Television Producers merged. If I've got this right, I believe like last time we were on strike together, SAG and the WGA, and SAG hadn't merged with AFTRA. It's a whole thing. But I believe the WGA was on strike against both the Motion Picture Producers Association and the Association of Television Producers. And I think SAG just went on strike against the Motion Picture Producers. So, back then when there were, and sometimes in the really, really distant past, we would negotiate with one studio at a time. And that let us kind of whipsaw them. We'd be able to go and extract some concessions from Disney and then go over to Fox and say, well, Disney gave us this, so what are you going to give us? And that worked out pretty well for the union. Now Disney and Fox are the same company. The studios negotiate together. And what that let them do when they started negotiating as one in the 70s is, it used to be that WGA, SAG, and DGA would negotiate together. And we would deal with the studios individually. Now they negotiate together and have been dealing with us individually. And that's let them whipsaw the unions. The DGA historically has gone in early for the last 3 or 4 decades and got.
And they just did it again.
They just did it again, and I'm happy for them if they got a deal that they're happy with. But and a lot of this stuff, there was the guy who was the head of the AMPTP before Carol Lombardini was a man named Nick Counter, and he was a very shrewd negotiator. And after a series of strikes in the 80s, and it wasn't just him, but they were able to successfully sell a number of myths to people. One you already mentioned, that the losses inflicted on all parties in a strike or a lockout can never be recouped. Which is just absolute horseshit. I don't know what writers lost in the 1960 strike, but I cannot put a price on my pension and health plans. And that's me times, there's 11,000 of us now. It was around 7,000 20 years ago, but that's thousands and thousands of writers over generations. I think that's worth something. I think that's worth the, I forget how many weeks they were out in 1960. Another myth that they put out there is that deadline bargaining puts too much pressure on things, and it's best to go in early in a calm environment and kind of work things out. Because of course they don't want us negotiating them to deadline, because that puts pressure on them to actually do something.
Allan, and you have a very famous saying about that. What do you say about deadlines?
Yeah, they clarify the negotiation. They clarify the mind. Nothing happens until you have a deadline.
Look, as a writer, I can tell you that's the truth. I remember Boyle's gas law in chemistry class. I always joke that it's the gas expands to fill all volume. Script's the same way, man. If I got 3 weeks to do that script, couldn't be done in less than 3 weeks. If I got 3 days to do the same script, I will have you a draft by Monday morning. It's, deadlines work. And then another, but that myth worked on us for a while in the 90s. The WGA acceded to or consented to this thing called the Contract Adjustment Committee. That we didn't even have a formal negotiation. We would just go and talking about how this really good contract just needs, some little tweaks here. And we lost a lot in that process. And then the other big myth that Nick Counter and other people put out there is that artists aren't capable of negotiating for themselves, that we really need industry insiders, in other words, their friends, who really know how the business works to settle things for us. And that happened too. So anyway, I'm getting off course, but what was the question?
I was talking about the AMPTP and the studios and the streamers and how their interests don't necessarily align.
They're brutally competitive with each other. Brutally.
Exactly.
And Netflix has, operating, I think, at a pretty significant loss initially, gotten all of them to jump headfirst into streaming with business plans that I don't think were better thought out than just Netflix is doing it. I really don't know how much they thought through how they were going to make money. I think there's plenty of money to be made. I think, probably if you ask me, I think stuff goes towards an ad supported model that's worked really well. And, see also social media, right? Elon Musk, genius that he is, tries to charge people $8 a month to use the service. That's not how that works, dude. You give the service away for free and then you sell the eyeballs. That's how it's always worked. And
we're creating your content, and you want us to pay $8 a month for the privilege of giving you our great content.
Yeah, no, but the streaming model has been somewhat similar. Like, I mean, not that people won't pay a premium for good television. That worked for HBO for many years, and it's working for, a lot of the streamers. But at the end of the day, to really have perpetual growth, which is what I think, the hedge fund mentality wants, not just good profits, not just good income, but perpetual growth. Well, there's 340 million Americans. And even if all of them, including the babies, all sign up individually for these services, you cap out. You can't grow beyond a certain point. The only way to grow is to keep raising your prices, at which point you're going to start losing subscribers. Right. You switch over to an ad-supported model, well, advertising costs can always go up, and the bigger a hit something is, the more you can charge for it, which would be a reason to release your data, by the way. So there's a model to, for these guys to make money, but they are, very, very fierce competitors, and yet they all sit in a room and are united in their desire to grind the people who make the only product they sell. And I think that just shows how afraid they are. At the end of the day, they know in their core that they don't know how to sit down in front of a computer and write a scene that would make somebody laugh or make somebody cry. They don't know, like actors do, how to bare your soul with a camera an inch or two from your face. Like some of those close-up shots, the camera's right here, and there's people doing stuff off screen. They don't know how to do that. And they certainly don't know how to look like some of these actors, so they don't know how to do any of that stuff. And that drives them nuts. For them, I think this is like, imagine if you owned a paper mill and all of a sudden the trees started arguing with you about how many of them you could chip and turn into paper. But we're not trees, we're human beings. We have lives, we have families. So, here we are.
What would be easier to replace, actors and writers with AI or executives with AI?
Oh, yeah, I've talked about this one a lot. Honestly, like, a CEO's job is just an optimization algorithm, and those have been around for a while, Yep. It's not inevitable. It won't be long before some board realizes that they will save money, with a AI performing the CEO's task. And then they'll be confronted with the awkward thing that, like, oh, the board could also be AI. You could name
it after Zaslav, the Zaslav algorithm.
Zazbot 5000. Yeah. But actors, there's some real danger there of people being able to realistically, we've all seen deep fakes and stuff, realistically represent their likeness. But actors aren't just a likeness; they're a performance. What they're providing, and I think it will be quite a while. I mean, and you can, Robert Zemeckis has been trying to do versions of this on and off, for years with the Beowulf movie or Polar Express. What you're essentially talking about is an animated film, and they work for years on that. So right now, with existing technology, it is so much cheaper to put actors in front of a camera, even if everything behind the actor is fake, which on shows like Mandalorian, most of it's a digitally created environment. And that too, by the way, that's putting talented set designers and prop masters, and set decorators out of work. So they're going to try to replace us. As far as writing goes, I think by the time you've got an artificial intelligence that could do what I do, that could actually come up with a story that is meaningful and that people can relate to in their lives, and that, it can make you laugh and make you cry and, feel something. I think at that point you're talking about an artificial general intelligence. And I know a little bit about this because I've worked on a show about artificial intelligence. If you get an artificial general intelligence that's going to be able to figure out how to improve itself, and then it's going to do that pretty quickly, and sometime in the next, 45 minutes to 2 weeks, you're going to have an artificial super intelligence. And at that point, copyright law is the least of your worries, and you should be trying to hide the nukes. So, And I think it speaks to something really fundamental because Teamsters are going to be dealing with this with self-driving cars, even though I think they're farther off than Elon Musk would like you to believe, because according to him, they got here in 2014. We have to decide as a society what's going to be best for us, all of us. An economy where people have jobs and there is competition and we can build lives and we can take care of ourselves and each other like we've always had, or a system where a very few robber barons at the top control the machines that do everything for everybody, and the rest of us are either broke or on some sort of universal basic income, and every 10, 15, 20 years we rise up, cut those guys' heads off, and then there's new guys. I'll take the former in a heartbeat. And I think the only reason that there are some people who might want the latter is because they're not thinking about the guillotine part. This is inevitable. Like, whenever one group gets too much power, that's not sustainable. So I'd much rather that we as a society decide to put some reasonable limits on what labor we're going to let machines take from us. Because I get it saves money, saves time, but not when you factor in the revolution. There's some real expenses to land and capital when that stuff happens. Not that I'm, making any kind of threats or anything. It's just history, that's what happens. So,
right.
I think if I was a CEO, I'd be worried about AI. The truth is, I think we should all be worried about it, because I think there are people who are investing a lot of time and money into trying to figure out how to make people with jobs that they like and are good at unable to do those jobs anymore. And I think that's fundamentally shitty. And I think the people who are doing that are bad people, and they should stop.
Talking about bad people, talk to me about tree trimming.
Oh, God, the tree trimming. Well, there's the tree trimming. There's the Radford Gate, which we finally, today was the first day of picketing at the Radford Gate that has shade. The Radford studio is owned by a private equity real estate firm. I can't remember their name. I wish I could. But they're like, we're not part of your AMPTP. You can't even picket here. And then after we're like, no, labor law says we can. They're like, well, all our gates are neutral gates. And they put everybody at one on the back side of the lot. So that's been going on at Universal. They suddenly decided to do nonstop construction all around their studio that involved ripping up all of the sidewalks and blocking the walk, don't walk signs. This is how maturely they've handled this. And then on the other side of because the Universal lot's huge, like, in New England, it would be a state. Not really, but on the far side of it at the Barham Gate, there are these trees that where it's just where we're setting up our stuff. And when it's 95 degrees outside and you can only pick it till noon because it's so hot that literally people start fainting. We've been dealing with that. Those trees were really great. And so then they show up one day and the trees have just been cut back. And they said, oh, this was the annual. Oh, it's Google it. Like the pictures are, I've had haircuts like that. Like it's like the trees joined the military. They're just cut back to like the bare branches. So they won't provide shade anymore. And the studio put out a thing saying, no, this is just an annual thing that we do for the health of the trees every year. And within like 15 minutes, somebody's like, that you didn't do it last year or the year before. And by the way, and then arborists start weighing in. Now's not the time of year that you trim. In fact, the way these trees got trimmed might actually have killed them. Anyway, all of that to say, at Radford, after there was an article about it in the news, about them, forcing us to picket at one dangerous gate on the back with no sun, they're like, oh, we'd love to have you come picket at the front gate and over at the Barham Gate of Universal by the trees after, they got exposed for trying to lie about, how they cut the trees back to nothing just to be dicks to both us and the trees. They turned up with tents saying like, oh, here are these tents for you. So it's it's a really ham-fisted kind of, like there was one day that, like, within 3 hours, or like over the course of about 5 hours, they did 3 really dumb things. They put out that they were bringing in Ari Emmanuel and Brian Lord to help with the SAG negotiation, which, having helped lead a labor collective action about the way Ari Emmanuel and Brian Lord ran their business. We did what we called the agency campaign, where we changed the way agents did business because they were taking huge payments directly from our employers, and that was affecting how well they negotiated for us. So bringing in Ari and Brian, like, not a great idea. And then they put out that they were also demanding that federal mediators come in. And then the article dropped about how it was somebody high ranking at the studios, I don't know who, but said that they're just going to hold out till we start losing our houses. And they'll call that a cruel but necessary evil. All that in one afternoon, and this was right before SAG went on strike. It was I told my therapist it's like they shit the bed. They got up, went in another room, and got in that bed and shit that too. Then they got in their car and drove to the mattress store. Like, it was just it's crazy because these are big companies, but on the PR front, they've been not that they haven't landed a few punches, but they've been relatively hapless, and it's embarrassing. And I think it also just shows that their position's pretty indefensible.
What seems to happen, David, in my experience, is that their natural state is acting as bullies who never get questioned for anything they ever do.
Yeah.
And they just cannot process effectively and strategically what happens when they get challenged with the facts, when they get challenged with the truth, or a strong group of people on the other side that they happen to need to be successful stand up for their rights.
Yes.
And that's when their natural state of being bullies, like, we're going to wait. This is our plan. And somebody's going to say this anonymously into the media because they think this is actually going to help them and make them sympathetic. It blew up in their faces.
Oh, yeah.
We're not going to negotiate. The reason why we're not meeting and trying to settle this is we're going to wait until the writers start losing their homes, until they start getting evicted. And when there's enough blood on the streets sufficient for our liking, then we're going to agree to meet and we'll settle this on our terms.
Yep.
Sorry, this is horrible, but we're all on board for this, and this is what we're doing. Oh, my God.
No, and somebody immediately said, joke's on them. None of us can afford houses. And I do have a house and I have a mortgage, and I knew this was probably coming, so I'm like, have savings, but genuinely, like, a huge cohort of the Writers Guild hasn't made enough working as a writer to, we've still got rent and stuff, but a lot of us haven't been able, between the housing market in LA and how little we get paid. So, but and supposedly, a bunch of the studio bosses got on a Zoom with each other either that night or the next morning and were screaming at each other about who had given that lose their houses interview. And then, of course, there was the infamous Ron Perlman video, which I've had the pleasure of working with Ron for 4 years on Teen Titans. And I don't know him well, but he's one of the kindest, funniest, just greatest guys to work with. And I absolutely believe he would burn your fucking house down.
That video was legendary. I think he took it down.
He did.
He took it down. But until he took it down, it was just, I probably watched it 50 times and had tears in my eyes every time.
Well, and I mean, the incredible impassioned speech that Fran Drescher gave the day that they declared their strike, she did such a good job conveying what I think everybody who's been inside a negotiation has had to confront. Because I love this business. I love my job. I love the people that I work with. I even love the people who give me notes, because sometimes those notes help, and also they're nice people. But then you get in the room of a negotiation for the contract for people like you, for your union contract in this business that you love, that you've given your life to. And you see that the people sitting across the table not only don't want to pay you what they're already paying you, but they want to take it away. They want to grind you down. They don't like you. They don't respect you, which, fuck it, I don't need any of that. But they actively hate you. Like they actively, maybe hate's too strong a word, but there is a profound, profound resentment of organized labor and of the fact that we would dare. I mean, the SAG-AFTRA negotiation ended with Carol Lombardini calling them uncivilized. Because what? Because they stood up for themselves? I'm pretty sure that's how most civilizations got started. You know, so it's just, but yeah, it's a lot of, you know, David Young, who's the executive director of the Writers Guild, he's on medical leave right now, but he, when we were in our agency campaign, he explained it this way, you know, and it speaks to the difference between an individual negotiation, which writers and actors are very familiar with, and a collective bargaining negotiation, right? In an individual negotiation, you know, I've sold them a show, or they want to hire me to write on a show. I want to work for them. They want me to work for them. Everybody's happy. And the Venn diagram is two kind of overlapping circles, right? And we're just arguing about what goes in that little oval in the center. You know, what title do I get? How much do I get paid? Happy, happy, happy. It's pretty calm. In a labor negotiation over something major, like, you know, AI or a proportionate increase in initial pay or streaming residuals, or the way that our agencies were doing business with these packaging fee deals. The Venn diagram is two circles, and they're not maybe even on the same piece of paper. And what you're fighting over is who's going to come over into whose circle. It's not about meeting in the middle, because I don't think either side can accomplish their goals by giving up what they'd have to meet in the middle. It's about who's going to come over into whose circle and negotiate on those terms. And in the case of the agencies, we held out for 2.5 years, and one by one, every agency came over and negotiated on our terms. And now that's, you know, done. We won. That's,
well, you fired what, 8,000 writers fired their agents?
Yeah, we all fired our agents.
Wow.
Yeah.
We all fired our agents. It was crazy. They didn't think we were going to do it. And they were like, wait, what? And, you know, some agencies, you know, figured it out and made deals pretty quickly. Others took a very, very long time. But, you know, we won the whole thing in packaging fee deals, which was a system where the agencies were taking these large direct payments from the people they were supposed to be negotiating with, rather than 10% of what their clients make. That system is done. There are still some shows paying, but it will phase out over time. And we're in
that would be like the club that I'm negotiating a contract with on behalf of my hockey player client, also paying me a fee for the negotiation.
Oh,
and that used to happen in hockey and in all sports.
Yeah.
In hockey, it happened until 1995. And in the 1994-95 lockout, Bob Goodenow, the executive director of the NHLPA, said, no more. Yeah. No more are teams going to be paying agents for the fee, because it's just such a blatant and direct conflict of interest.
Yeah. And it's crazy, because they were, not only were they getting money directly from the studios, part of the deal on that was that they wouldn't take 10% from their clients. So their clients weren't even paying them. They were only getting paid by the studios, and huge amounts of money that they were getting paid. And it's funny, because like you talk to like a lawyer who works in the entertainment industry about it before we, you know, took this fight on, and they're like, that's just the way the business works. There's nothing you can do to change it. You talk to a lawyer outside the business, and they're like, are you fucking kidding me? That is a massive breach of, because agents are fiduciaries. They have a fiduciary duty. So it was a huge problem. But so anyway, so we held together for 2.5 years, and we fixed that. And it's because we got them to come into our circle. And it's a similar thing right now. And, you know, I have every faith in this incarnation of the Writers Guild, the people that I'm walking a picket line with. I've never seen determination like it in my life. You know, like in 2017, when we were talking about going on strike, in 2007, when we were on strike, go to union meetings and there'd be people saying, isn't this crazy? Shouldn't we give up? Isn't this dumb? And there may be some people out there feeling that way, and my heart goes out to them. But most people that I talk to are like, yeah, no, fuck it. We'll do whatever it takes to win. And which is pretty great. Wish we didn't have to go through this, but, I've never had a doubt in my mind that we're going to get the studios over into our circle and negotiating off our terms, and we're going to get what we need. We're not going to get everything, but we're going to get what we need because we have to. That's why it's a need. They're fighting for things that they want, which is a slightly higher profit margin on one section of their labor costs. It's a huge, they're losing billions doing this. Billions. It's genuinely like, I don't know how the people in charge on their side keep their jobs when this is done. Because like the smart, cheap way through this was to find the WGA's bottom line by moving your asks up and find the lowest possible deal that we would have to take. And I don't know what the numbers were and on which asks, but I guarantee you there was a shitty deal that we would have had to take. We would have been like, well, fuck. If
it's close enough. It's close enough that
if we don't take this, half our members aren't going to want to go out on strike over it. And if we do, the other half are going to hate us for taking it. That's what they should have done. They didn't even make in our negotiations an effort to find that. Like the board members that I know across the board and negotiating committee members expressed surprise that like, well, they made it an easy choice because they didn't even try. They didn't even try to find our bottom line. Instead, they chose a path that's cost them, right on the heels of Barbie and Oppenheimer. What do you got next? Literally the theater business, the movie theater business, which has been struggling through COVID, is coming back, and they're shutting down the pipeline over what? Pride, arrogance, a few tiny percentage points. How is that good business strategy? I mean, I got a BFA in theater studies. And if I get this shit, how do these guys with MBAs not realize that sometimes things just cost money and you got to pay for it. You just can't grind everybody until they lose their house. So, it's some really poor decision-making on the part of the studios. It's something, they could call us and end this tomorrow, and it wouldn't have to be complete capitulation on their part, but they've got to put the needs of their company and the needs of their shareholder and the needs of the long-term survival of their company, and by the way, their own job security, ahead of their ego. Because at the end of the day, I think that's all this is just how dare you? Do you know
who we are?
Yeah.
Do you know how much money we've made? And who are you to tell us anything?
Yeah. I'm some guy who writes, network, mostly crime procedurals. All I do all day is figure out how to kill people and then figure out how to catch myself. That's it. And I'm from middle-class family in Texas, and I went to theater school. Who the fuck am I? And who the fuck are any of my, cohorts to, and that's the thing is ultimately, and this is where I think it speaks to not just this industry, but every industry in America right now. It's about social class. We have a class of people who have been able to amass so much money, who, by the way, across the board got a lot richer during the pandemic while most of us were suffering. They've got so much money that they don't view us as their equals in a country that is founded on the precept that we are all equal. And strikes suck, but they're one of the only tools we have to remind them. So,
well, we got to say, we wish you the very best of luck with it.
You.
I know it's been long and protracted, but it's hard not to empathize with, root for. I don't know what the right word is, but
I'll take it. That's good.
Yeah. Yeah.
No, I so appreciate you guys having me on, and because I'm really, really struck by how it's all the same thing. And there are, there are dividing things. People in different industries look at like, well, what do I have in common with an actor or a writer or a hockey player whose name's up on a big marquee, or whatever what's Jumbotron? Couldn't think of the word. What do I have in common with those people? And what you have in common is that we're all labor. We're all labor.
Yeah. Well, we'll wrap it up there, David. Thank you so much for joining us, for giving us your time, for being as candid as you possibly can be. And we wish you, like I said, the very, very best going forward through this.
Thank you so much. It's lovely to meet both of you, Adam, Allan. I really appreciate it. Take care.
David, I'm going to be honored to one day join you out on the picket line and bring some extra water and maybe a dozen pizzas and be there and join you in solidarity.
Thank you.
All right.
Person of interest was awesome. Just throwing that out there.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. I love
that show.
Yeah, I could do an hour on that too.
This has been Agent Provocateur with Allan Walsh and Adam Wylde. Powered by Sports Interaction. Want to bet? Follow Allan Walsh on Twitter @WalshA. Subscribe wherever you get your podcasts by searching Agent Provocateur and hitting the subscribe button. YouTube.com/SDPN.